In the silence of the desert, where time loses its meaning and eternity whispers through the shifting sands, there existed a truth so profound that the world chose to forget it. The book of Enoch speaks of visions, of angels who descended from heaven, of knowledge forbidden to mortal eyes. Yet what the scribes never recorded, what the patriarchs buried beneath layers of doctrine and tradition, was the story of Enoch's daughters, the Seraphinae, the burning ones, who carried within their souls the fire of divine prophecy. "The stars remember what men have forgotten," whispered Amara, the eldest of Enoch's 7 daughters, as she gazed upon the constellation of Orion from the rooftop of their dwelling in the ancient city of Babel. Her fingers traced symbols in the air, symbols that seemed to shimmer with otherworldly light. Father sees what is to come, but we see what has always been. The year was beyond counting, in the time before the great flood, when the boundary between heaven and earth was thin as morning mist. Enoch, the 7th from Adam, walked with God in the cool of the evening, receiving visions that would echo through millennia. But his daughters possessed something perhaps more dangerous, the ability to see the divine feminine aspect of creation, the Shekinah that dwelt within all things. Zara, the youngest, barely 16 summers old, sat weaving at her loom, her fingers moving with supernatural grace. "Sister, the dreams come again. I see towers of crystal reaching toward heaven, and women in white robes holding scrolls that burn with golden fire. They speak of a time when the daughters of men will remember their true nature." The 7 sisters were known throughout the region not for their beauty alone, but for their uncanny ability to predict harvests, to heal with touch, and to speak words that carried the weight of divine authority. This last gift proved most troublesome to the established order of priests and elders who governed the growing cities of that ancient world. Enoch himself was conflicted. The visions granted to him by the Almighty spoke of judgment, of the corruption of creation by fallen angels, of the necessity of preserving righteousness through the coming deluge. Yet his daughters brought him dreams of restoration, of a time when the divine feminine would rise again to balance the scales of creation. "My daughters," Enoch spoke one evening as the family gathered for the sacred meal, "the watchers have shown me things that trouble my spirit. The sons of God have looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, but their union brings only corruption. Yet in you, I see something different, a purity that transcends the earthly realm." Amara's eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. "Father, what we have been given is not for us alone. The mother of all living speaks through us, preparing the way for one who will come after, one who will be born of woman yet conceived by the Holy Spirit." The eldest sister rose from her place and walked to the window, her silhouette framed against the star-filled sky. "The patriarchs will write their histories and speak of sons and fathers, of blood and conquest. But the true history of redemption flows through the daughters of Eve, through Sarah and Rebekah, through Ruth and Miriam, and through us, the daughters of Enoch." It was then that the first sign of opposition appeared. A delegation of priests from the temple of Marduk arrived at their dwelling, their faces stern with religious authority. The high priest, Shamash Bel, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of institutional power. "Enoch, righteous seer, your daughters have been speaking in the marketplace of things that disturb the natural order. Women who claim to receive visions from the divine throne, who dare to interpret the sacred mysteries. This cannot be permitted." Enoch's response was measured but firm. "They speak only what they have been given. If their words disturb you, perhaps you should examine why truth sounds like blasphemy to your ears." The confrontation marked the beginning of a campaign to silence the daughters of Enoch. Rumors began to spread that they practiced dark arts, that they consorted with the fallen watchers who had corrupted the earth. The very gifts that had once made them celebrated now made them targets of fear and suspicion. Zara, the youngest, was the first to be attacked. While drawing water from the well at dawn, she was surrounded by a group of young men who had been influenced by the priest's teachings. "Witch," they called her, "daughter of demons, seducer of the righteous." But as they raised their hands to strike, something extraordinary happened. The girl's eyes began to glow with an inner fire, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from beyond the physical realm. "I see your children's children's children, and they will curse your names for what you do this day. The one who comes after will gather the scattered daughters and give them voice again." The young men fled in terror, but word of the incident spread quickly. The priests declared that the daughters of Enoch were possessed by the spirits of the Watchers, that their prophecies were contaminated by fallen wisdom. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. It was during this time of persecution that the sisters made a decision that would echo through the ages. They would preserve their teachings, their visions, their understanding of the divine feminine, but they would hide these truths in places where only the initiated could find them. Under cover of darkness, they began their great work. Each sister contributed her unique gifts to the creation of 7 sacred texts. Scrolls that contained not merely prophecies, but a complete understanding of the cosmic order that included both masculine and feminine principles of divinity. Amara wrote of the Shekinah, the divine presence that dwelt within creation itself. The Spirit of the Almighty is not distant and harsh, but intimate and nurturing. She hovers over the waters of creation. She births the stars. She whispers comfort to the afflicted. Miriam, the second sister, recorded visions of the coming Messiah that differed significantly from the expectations of the priests. The promised one will be born of woman, but not through the domination of the masculine over the feminine. Rather, through the willing cooperation of both, a new creation will emerge. Each scroll was a masterpiece of spiritual insight, combining prophetic vision with practical wisdom, cosmic understanding with intimate knowledge of human nature. They wrote in a coded language that used symbols and metaphors drawn from the natural world, the phases of the moon, the behavior of animals, the patterns of weather and season. But their greatest innovation was the creation of a secret sisterhood, a network of women who would preserve and transmit these teachings across generations. They called themselves the guardians of the heavenly tablets, and they developed rituals and practices that would keep the flame of divine feminine wisdom burning even through the darkest ages. The crisis came when King Nimrod himself, ruler of Babel, demanded that Enoch surrender his daughters to serve in the temple of Marduk. The king had been convinced by his priests that the sisters' power could be harnessed for the glory of his kingdom, but only if they were properly controlled and channeled through official religious structures. Enoch's response was swift and decisive. "My daughters belong to the Almighty alone. They will not be servants to any earthly throne." The confrontation escalated quickly. Soldiers surrounded the house of Enoch, and the patriarch was given an ultimatum: surrender his daughters or face the consequences of defying royal authority. It was then that the most remarkable event in the sisters' lives occurred. As they knelt in prayer together, the youngest, Zara, began to speak in a voice that was not her own. "Fear not, daughters of the Most High. Your time upon this earth draws to a close, but your work will endure. The scrolls you have written will survive the flood, will be preserved in secret places, will resurface when the world has need of the mother's wisdom." The vision that followed was shared by all 7 sisters simultaneously. They saw the great deluge that would cleanse the earth, but they also saw beyond it ages of patriarchal dominance, of feminine wisdom forced underground, of women who would carry the sacred fire in secret, passing it from mother to daughter, from teacher to student, from mystic to mystic. But they also saw the ultimate restoration. A time when the divine feminine would emerge from the shadows, when the daughters of Eve would remember their true nature, when the balance between masculine and feminine principles would be restored to creation. As the soldiers prepared to break down their door, something miraculous occurred. The house of Enoch was suddenly enveloped in a column of light so brilliant that the attackers were forced to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the family had vanished, leaving only the 7 sacred scrolls hidden in places that would be revealed to the worthy in ages to come. The official records speak only of Enoch being translated by God, taken up to heaven without seeing death. But the secret traditions of the Guardians tell a different story, that Enoch and his daughters were transported to a realm between heaven and earth, where they continue their work of preparing the way for the ultimate restoration of all things. The scrolls themselves were scattered across the ancient world. One found its way to the Library of Alexandria, where it was studied by Gnostic scholars who incorporated its teachings into their understanding of Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom. Another was buried in the caves near Qumran, where it waited for 2 millennia to be discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls. A third was carried by Jewish mystics into medieval Europe, where it influenced the development of Kabbalah and the veneration of the Shekinah. But perhaps the most significant impact of the daughters of Enoch was their influence on the early Christian understanding of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Guardians recognized in her the fulfillment of their most sacred prophecies, a woman who would cooperate with the divine plan not through submission, but through willing partnership, who would give birth to the one who would restore the balance between heaven and earth. The Gnostic Gospels, many written by women who had been initiated into the mysteries of the Guardians, present a radically different picture of early Christianity than the official accounts. They speak of Mary Magdalene as the primary apostle, of female disciples who received special revelations, of a Jesus who taught the necessity of balancing masculine and feminine principles in the spiritual life. These texts were eventually suppressed by the emerging Orthodox Church, but they survived in hidden libraries, in secret schools, in the teachings of mystics and contemplatives who understood that the full truth of divine love could not be contained in purely masculine categories. The legacy of Enoch's daughters lived on in the great female mystics of history, Hildegard of Bingen, who received visions of the divine feminine that echoed the ancient prophecies, Julian of Norwich, who dared to speak of Jesus as mother, the Begins of medieval Europe, who formed communities of women dedicated to spiritual wisdom and social service. In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the veneration of the Theotokos, the God-bearer, preserved elements of the ancient understanding of the divine feminine. The icons of Mary enthroned in heaven, crowned as Queen of the universe, reflected the visions recorded in the scrolls of Enoch's daughters. Even in Islam, the figure of Fatima, daughter of the Prophet, carried forward aspects of the ancient wisdom. The Sufi tradition speaks of the perfect woman, the feminine aspect of divine revelation, in terms that would have been familiar to the guardians of the heavenly tablets. As the ages passed, the specific memory of Enoch's daughters faded from popular consciousness, but their influence continued to work like leaven in the spiritual life of humanity. Women who had never heard their names found themselves drawn to contemplative practices, to healing arts, to prophetic gifts that connected them to the ancient stream of divine feminine wisdom. The modern rediscovery of these traditions has not been accidental. As humanity stands at another crossroads in its spiritual evolution, as the masculine principles of domination and control threaten to destroy the very fabric of creation, the wisdom of the daughters of Enoch emerges once again from the shadows. Contemporary scholars studying the Gnostic texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the surviving fragments of ancient mystical traditions have begun to piece together the story that was deliberately suppressed. They speak of a lost Christianity, a forgotten Judaism, a suppressed Islam, traditions that honored the divine feminine as equally essential to spiritual wholeness. The prophecies of Enoch's daughters spoke of a time when the scattered fragments of divine wisdom would be gathered together again, when the daughters of Eve would remember their true nature, when the balance between masculine and feminine principles would be restored to creation. Many believe that time is now. In meditation centers and contemplative communities around the world, women and men are rediscovering practices that echo the ancient rituals of the guardians. They speak of the divine as mother as well as father, of the Holy Spirit as feminine wisdom, of the necessity of healing the wounded relationship between humanity and the earth. The 7 sacred scrolls of Enoch's daughters have never been found in their original form, but their essence continues to speak to those who have ears to hear. In moments of deep prayer and contemplation, sensitive souls still receive visions that echo the ancient prophecies. They see a time of restoration coming when the divine feminine will emerge from the shadows to heal the wounds of creation. Perhaps the most profound teaching of the daughters of Enoch was not about the future, but about the eternal present. The recognition that the divine feminine has never truly been absent, only hidden, waiting for humanity to mature enough to receive the fullness of divine love without distortion or corruption. As we stand at the threshold of a new age, the whispered wisdom of Amara, Zara, and their sisters calls us to remember what we have always known in our deepest hearts, that the divine is both father and mother, that creation is both word and womb, that the path to salvation leads through the marriage of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, masculine and feminine principles united in perfect love. The stars still remember what men have forgotten, and in the silence of the desert, where time loses its meaning and eternity whispers through the shifting sands, the daughters of Enoch continue their eternal vigil, waiting for the moment when humanity will be ready to receive the fullness of divine wisdom once again. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.